This is Tamara Marie, host of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast, and I have a quick announcement before we jump into this week's episode. Now, I know that if you are just starting out learning Spanish, maybe you haven't had very many conversations yet, or if you have been speaking for a while, maybe you're just used to having some very basic conversations, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿De dónde eres? But you haven't really gotten to any deeper conversations. Or you might just not have anyone to practice speaking Spanish with on a regular basis that will actually give you the feedback that you need to improve. If that's you, I invite you to join our free Spanish Conversation Challenge. We will be having free practice sessions where you'll be able to practice speaking with a friendly native Spanish speaker on our team and other like-minded individuals like you who are aspiring bilinguals that really want to improve their Spanish. We're opening up for all levels, so you can join the free challenge and get an idea of what it feels like to really be making Spanish part of your daily life and having regular conversations. We will also be giving you conversational phrases, practice scripts so that you know exactly what to say to prepare for each conversation. If you want to sign up for the challenge, go to SpanishConversationChallenge.com. That's SpanishConversationChallenge.com. We get started this Saturday, April 25th. All right, now let's get to this week's episode. Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation, everything is flowing, your Spanish is coming out the way you want it to, and then suddenly your mind goes completely blank? You can't think of what you're going to say, or the other person says something and you didn't catch it at all. We've all been there, and it can be a moment of panic, especially if you're not prepared. So instead of freaking out or sounding like a textbook and saying, Puede repetir eso, por favor? I want you to listen to this week's episode. I'm going to give you 10 natural sounding phrases that native speakers actually use to buy time in conversations, clarify their points, and keep the conversation going smoothly. Entonces, vamos a empezar. Let's get started.
Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast,
the show for Spanish learners
that love music,
travel, and culture.
Close your grammar textbooks,
shut down the language apps, and open your ears
to how Spanish is spoken in the real world.
Let us show you
how to go from beginner
to bilingual.
Here's your host,
certified language coach,
Tamara Marie.
Hola, bienvenidos al episodio 240. Welcome to episode 240 of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. In this episode, we're going to review 10 Spanish phrases that you can use to keep your conversations flowing. A lot of times we're in a conversation, whether we're speaking Spanish or even our native language, we might run into a point where we are not quite sure what to say. The difference is in our native language, we have ways of stalling for time and giving ourselves time to think about what we're going to say, and then asking the other person questions or asking them to repeat themselves that don't sound so robotic. So in this episode, I want to share with you phrases that native Spanish speakers actually use when they get stuck in conversation or they need to buy some time. So you may have heard things like, when you're not understanding someone, just say, ¿Puedes repetir eso, por favor? Which is literally, can you repeat that, please? And that's fine when you are just starting out or if you're in more of a classroom setting. But when you're out in the real world having conversations, you might want to come up with something that sounds a little more natural. So in this episode, I'm going to give you some examples of things that you can say and in what context so that you can, really go through a conversation with your whole personality as an adult. A lot of times when you're learning something, you do have to have a beginner's mindset. Sometimes you can feel like a child because, again, you're starting out from scratch. Whereas as an adult, you've mastered your native language, hopefully, and maybe some other skills that you've learned. So it can be really difficult when we're trying to express ourselves and we're very limited in our vocabulary. And the ways in which we have to express ourselves can feel like we are almost babies. So I want to give you some phrases that you can use when you're really in a conversation and you're just getting stuck. And, you can use these when you're really trying to think of what to say, or if you're just having trouble thinking of the words in Spanish. But if you do it this way, it won't sort of put off those alarm bells that, okay, there's a gringo or gringa talking, right? We want to stay in Spanish. Because often at these times, if we switch to English, if we're talking to a bilingual person, or if we just don't show the confidence and we give up, the person will either stop engaging with us, or if they know English, they will start to use English. And now our opportunity to speak Spanish, which is what we really wanted, has gone out the window. So I hope that you will find some of these phrases helpful, and I want you to note them down. And before I get started, I want to let you know, as always, you can go to our show notes page to get a list of these phrases. So just note down learnspanishconssalsa.com/240 for episode 240. You'll be able to find a list of all the phrases and examples that I'm going through in this episode. And if you stick around to the end, I will let you know about some bonus phrases if you need a little bit more help and you want to go further for how you can get those. All right, so let's get started. So first thing is, if you are just trying to think, like you're trying to buy yourself some time, you're, just like I'm doing now, I'm like, well, I'm kind of slowing down with the words I'm saying. You can use that in Spanish, but instead of saying something in English like, well, I don't know, right? Where I want you to practice some of these in Spanish so that they become a natural part of your vocabulary. So the first one that I have, and this is very, very common, you probably have heard native speakers say this if you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube videos in Spanish, and there's two people having a conversation. You'll probably hear something like, o sea. So that is literally the letter O, like O, and sea, which is a form of the verb ser. So it's S-E-A. We're not going to get into the grammar for a lot of these phrases because it really doesn't matter. You just have to know that this is how it sounds and this is when it's used. But again, all the examples will be on our show notes page at learnspanishconssalsa.com. But o sea is something that you can use to say like, I mean, or in other words, right? So if you're pausing, you're just trying to think of what you're trying to say, you want to gather your thoughts, you can just say o sea. So for example, I could say, o sea, no es que no quiera ir, es que yo estoy muy cansado. O sea, no es que no quiera ir, es que estoy muy cansado. Or estoy muy cansada. So that is, I mean, it's not that I don't want to go, it's that I'm very tired. So that's another one. Es que is like, it's that. So you're trying to explain. So the first one we have is o sea, to mean I mean, or in other words. Another word that you'll probably hear a lot of Spanish speakers use that are native speakers. You won't hear as many Spanish learners use this one because I think it's hard to translate it directly into English. So it's really hard sometimes to use phrases like that. At least for me, I know that when I first started learning Spanish, if I could translate it literally, it was a lot easier versus a phrase that I really had to stop and think about, and I would overthink it all the time. So I don't want you to overthink these. I just want you to know this is what it is, and this is how it's used, all right? So the word I have here is fíjate. Fíjate. All right, so fíjate, it means something like, all right, look, check this out. Get this, right? It's like something you say before you're about to say something else. So, for example, I could say, fíjate que ayer vi a tu hermano en el centro comercial. Fíjate que ayer vi a tu hermano en el centro comercial. So get this. Yesterday, I saw your brother at the mall. So again, you can really just use this in any context where you're trying to where you're about to explain something. It's like, look, check this out. Sometimes you might hear people say, a ver, right? It's like, look. So look at this, check this out. So again, just something you can use to buy time, fíjate. And then you can just go ahead with what you're about to say. All right, the third one I have. Now, this is one where when you're trying to think of something, you're trying to put your words together, and you're about to explain something, or you're about to give your opinion or your thoughts. But again, you're trying to get them together, and you don't want there to be awkward, dead silence. You can say something like, a ver, ¿cómo te explico? A ver, ¿cómo te explico? So that literally means like, let's see, how do I explain this to you? Right? So that a ver is like, a ver, let's see. So you'll hear that often on its own too, a ver. It's so much like, mira, let's see, look at that, right? But if I say, ¿cómo te explico? It's like, how do I say this? right? That's how I might say it in English. It's like, let me think. How do I put this? ¿Cómo te explico? So, for example, I could say, a ver, ¿cómo te explico? Es una situación un poco complicada. Es una situación un poco complicada. All right, so it's like, how do I explain this? It's a situation's a little complicated, right? Or it's a bit of a complicated situation. All right, so the next one we have, and this one I think sometimes we can take too literally in English, right? So we're used to using the verb entender, which means to understand. And we're used to saying to people, no entiendo, no te entiendo. It's like, I don't understand, or I don't understand you. So we're very probably used to hearing, we've heard no te entiendo, or no entiendo, I don't understand. But in Spanish and natural conversation, the verb entender can also be used to say something sort of like, you know what I mean? Do you get it? Do you understand me? Right? But in English, we probably wouldn't say, do you understand me? Right? We would be like, you know what I mean? Or if you're from different places, you might go, yeah, I mean, know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Something like that. So that's the kind of vibe I want you to take away from this one. So don't take it too literally. But this phrase is, me entiendes. Me entiendes. And it literally means, do you understand me? So that entender in the tu form is entiendes. Entiendes. So that's you understand. But when I add the me in front, I'm saying, do you understand me? Okay? So me entiendes. But again, this is not necessarily literal, like, do you understand what I'm saying? It's literally like, do you get it? You get me? You know what I mean? So you can use it at the end of a phrase. It's sort of like you're asking a person, do they agree with you, or do they understand what you're saying in a, not in a literal way, but in a more of the meaning of what you're saying or the spirit of it. It's like, you get it, right? You get it. So for example, I could say, es muy difícil aprender un idioma si no lo practicas todos los días. ¿Me entiendes? So it's something like, it's almost like you're saying it, right? Right? You get it, right? Okay, so I want you to think about that one and practice it. And again, think about it how you would say it in English. And then you can add it on to the end of your sentences in Spanish. So that's another great one that a lot of native speakers say, but a lot of Spanish learners don't know about. And then there's the classic stall. Like in English, if someone asks you something, you go, you know what? That's a good question. That's a great question, right? That's a perfectly natural way to respond in Spanish too, because when we say it in English, we're really just giving ourselves time to think about the question, right? It's like, that is a really good question. Okay, so in Spanish, if you wanted to say something similar, you would say literally good question. So you would say, buena pregunta. Yo diría que. Buena pregunta. Yo diría que. All right, so that second part is I would say that. So yo diría, and this is the verb decir, which is to say or to tell, but this is in the conditional tense. So this I would say, and you probably already know if you've studied any grammar that decir is a very irregular verb. So that's why it might be unrecognizable in this form. But yo diría is I would say. So I would say that, yo diría que. So again, you're really just giving yourself time to think. You're setting yourself up for a conversation. You're making it flow, and it sounds more natural than just kind of jumping into it or having a long pause while you sit there and look at the ceiling, right? So you would say, buena pregunta. Yo diría que. So like I would say that, and then you go ahead and answer the question. So for example, I could say, buena pregunta. Yo diría que lo mejor es esperar hasta mañana. Buena pregunta. Yo diría que lo mejor es esperar hasta mañana. So that means, good question. I would say the best thing to do is wait until tomorrow. All right, so again, depends on the context of the question. So these are great ones that you can use if you are stalling for time or you just want your conversation to flow more naturally. So those first 5 were more about trying to gather your thoughts and buy time. So we had o sea, which is like I mean, or in other words, fíjate, like look at this, check this out. Guess what? Then we have a ver cómo te explico. Let's see, how do I explain this to you? Or me entiendes? You understand? You get it? You know what I mean? And buena pregunta, yo diría, like good question, I would say. So those are things to buy yourself time. But if someone says something and you literally just didn't get what they said, right? You were like, maybe you were distracted, you weren't paying attention, maybe you didn't understand one of the words that they said. I know for me, and even happens sometimes now in conversation, especially if I haven't been practicing recently or speaking a lot of Spanish, sometimes my brain is on a little bit of a delay. So I understand exactly what the person said, but I really just need a few seconds for my brain to catch up and go, oh, yeah, and then figure out how to respond. So instead of, again, just kind of standing there looking like a deer in headlights, there are some things that you can say. And again, it's not saying, can you repeat yourself? Because I don't know about you, but like in English, if someone says that to you, what are you going to think? That they weren't listening, right? It's like that zoned out look. Someone's looking out the window while you're talking and you're like, did you hear what I said? And they're like, what? So we don't want to give the impression that we weren't listening, but we do want to be engaged in the conversation and give ourselves time to catch up. And then if we need to ask them to repeat, ask them in a way that is a little bit more natural. So the first thing you can say is, ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? And that literally means, what was it that you said? So again, you're like, I heard you, but like, I didn't catch that. It's like, what did you say exactly, right? It's a lot better than saying like, can you repeat that? Like, I wasn't listening at all. So for example, I could say, perdona, acaba de sonar el timbre. ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? Right? Perdona, acaba de sonar el timbre. ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? So that's literally, sorry, the doorbell just rang. What was it that you said? So again, there's some kind of natural interruption, right? Like if you're on the phone, maybe someone else calls, someone walks into the room, the doorbell rings, you get a package delivered, right? Something just happened, so I need you to repeat what you said. A lot better than, ¿puedes repetir? Okay? So that's the first one. ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? The second one is, no te escucho bien. ¿Cómo dijiste? No te escucho bien. ¿Cómo dijiste? So it's like, I can't hear you that well. What did you say? So in this case, again, maybe it's just that they're talking low. Maybe in truth, they said something you really just didn't understand, right? But you're saying, like, I can't really hear you that well. Can you say that again? Or what did you say? So no te escucho bien, ¿cómo dijiste? So for example, I could say, perdón, hay mucho ruido aquí y no te escucho bien. ¿Cómo dijiste? Hay mucho ruido aquí y no te escucho bien. ¿Cómo dijiste? So look, there's a lot of noise here. There's a lot of noise here and I can't hear you well. What did you say again? What was that you said? So again, you're probably wondering why ¿cómo dijiste and not ¿qué dijiste? So ¿qué dijiste is a little bit more direct. It's like, what'd you say, right? So ¿cómo in general, and if you listen to the podcast before, I've always shared this, that when you're talking to a native speaker and you want them to repeat something or you didn't hear something, if you're giving a one-word answer and you say ¿qué?, it can sound really abrupt. And even though you don't mean to be rude, it just doesn't sound natural. Usually a native speaker would say ¿cómo?, which is almost like, how's that? Come again, right? So it's not a literal what, So generally saying ¿cómo? Would just mean like, what did you say? But if I say ¿cómo dijiste? It's like, how's that? Like, what was it that you said? It's a little bit more specific. So you could just say ¿cómo? But if you want to, again, my goal here is to give you phrases that are a little bit more than just one word answers so that you can buy yourself time, but also sound natural. So that's no te escucho bien, ¿cómo dijiste? Then we have, and this one, I really do think that for native English speakers, this can sound a little formal, but it really isn't that formal in Spanish. Sometimes there are words that are used in Spanish by native speakers that when we try to translate them literally, we really just wouldn't use them in English, but they are very common in Spanish. So this is an example of that. And this is, ¿a qué te refieres con eso? ¿A qué te refieres con eso? So that's, what do you mean by that? So literally, ¿a qué te refieres con eso is like, almost like, what are you referring to? What are you referring to with that? That's kind of how we would probably think about it when we see refieres. But it's really like, what are you referring to? Yes, in a way, but that sounds really formal in English. This is more like, what do you mean by that? Like, what are you talking about? But not in a rude way. It's like, what is it exactly that you're saying? So, for example, if I say, hablas de un cambio de planes, entre comillas. So, like air quotes. Hablas de un cambio de planes. ¿A qué te refieres con eso? Hablas de un cambio de planes. ¿A qué te refieres con eso? So, all right, so it's like you're talking to someone, you say, okay, you talk about a change of plans, quote unquote. What do you mean by that? So again, if someone says something that's vague, or again, that you just don't understand, you can repeat back to them the phrase or thing they said and like, what does that mean? What are you referring to when you say that? So, ¿a qué te refieres con eso? It's like you're actually asking them specifically about the thing that they just said. Hopefully, you're able to repeat some of it back to them, and then you can ask the question, ¿a qué te refieres con eso? All right, then we have, espérate, me perdí un poco. Espérate, me perdí un poco. So this one, again, this is classic. Like, you probably would say this in English conversations, like, wait, you lost me, right? It's literally like, wait, you lost me there. Hold up. So in Spanish, the way to say it is like, espérate, like, wait a second. Me perdí un poco. So this me perdí un poco is like, I'm a little lost here. Like, I got a little lost, or you lost me, right? And then you can ask a question to follow up. ¿Me lo puedes volver a explicar? ¿Me lo puedes volver a explicar? So, can you explain it to me again? So that me lo puedes is can you, sort of to me, right? To me, volver a explicar. And this is just saying to explain it again. All right. So, for example, I could say, espérate, me perdí un poco con lo del viaje. ¿Me lo puedes volver a explicar? Espérate, me perdí un poco con lo del viaje. ¿Me lo puedes volver a explicar? So it's like, okay, hold on. I got a little lost about the trip. Can you explain it to me again? So again, maybe someone's telling you the itinerary, you're about to go on a trip and they say, okay, on Monday we're going to do this, on Tuesday we're going to do this. Like, hey, wait a minute. You lost me a little bit. Can you explain it again? So again, very natural way of saying it without just, saying like, repeat yourself. All right. And the last one I have is, ¿cómo fue? ¿Cómo fue? And again, this is very similar to como. It's like, what? Come again? So it's like, what was that? ¿Cómo fue? What was that? Repíteme eso último. Repíteme eso último. So in this case, I'm saying come again. Like, how's that? But then I'm not just saying repeat yourself, right? Can you repeat, please? I'm saying repeat that last part back to me, right? So again, you're letting them know, like, I am listening to you, but I just missed that last thing you said. Okay? Repíteme eso último. So you can say, ¿cómo fue? Repíteme eso último. Like if someone's just talking to you and maybe they're talking too fast, right? And you just missed the last thing they said. This is a way to kind of politely pause and say, hold up, espérate. Repíteme eso último. So you can combine some of these as well, right? So again, the idea is that you're able to repeat these phrases at the time that you need them. So what I would suggest you do is that you take notes, you write down the ones that sound more natural to you, that you think that would be the most useful, and you practice saying them. Get them into your sort of mental muscle memory so that when it's time for a conversation, you're not searching now for these phrases as well, but they are second nature to you. So these ones, again, for asking someone to repeat themselves without asking them to repeat themselves are, ¿Qué fue lo que dijiste? Like, what was that you said? No te escucho bien. ¿Cómo dijiste? So I didn't hear you well. I can't hear you too well. What was that you said? ¿A qué te refieres con eso? Like, what do you mean by that? Espérate, me perdí un poco. Like, wait, I got a little bit lost. ¿Me lo puedes volver a explicar? Can you repeat that again? And then, ¿cómo fue? Repíteme eso último. So how is that? Come again? Repeat that last part to me. All right, so again, these are 10 phrases that I hope you found helpful that will really improve your ability to speak Spanish in a way that flows and sounds natural and more like a native speaker. Now, as I promised, if you want to get access to all these phrases, go to our website on our show notes page at learnspanishconsalsa.com/240 for episode 240 of the podcast. And I also want to let you know that we do have an extended bonus list of all 21 phrases. So these are 10 to get you started, but we have a full list of 21 phrases, other ways that you can pause, transition, and things that you can use to sound natural and like a native speaker when you're in a conversation. So if you want access to that full list of 21 phrases, then I encourage you to sign up to be a podcast supporter. You can go to learnspanishconsalsa.com/support. And if you sign up there to be a supporter, we are also running a bonus during our 7th year. So we're celebrating our 7th year anniversary all year long. And we are discounting our podcast supporter benefit. And we're also giving you access to our special course, which is 7 songs to transform your Spanish. I go over 7 different songs that I love, that I've reviewed on the podcast, break down the lyrics, and I also give you access to an exclusive interview with the artist for each song, as well as, of course, the lyrics breakdown, some vocabulary, some quizzes, and conversational phrases that you can use in your Spanish conversation. So if you want access to all 21 conversational phrases from my list today, as well as our 7 songs to transform your Spanish, sign up to be a podcast supporter at learnspanishconsalsa.com/support. As always, I hope that something you've heard in this episode has taken you one step closer from Spanish beginner to bilingual. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you for listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast at learnspanishconsalsa.com.